Remember, that's funny that, he would bring that up because the assassination of Robert really changed my life. It really did. His latest, published in December, is a memoir, The Mysterious Son, a life-changing passage between schizophrenia and shamanism. Here's a copy of his book, My Mysterious Son. Anybody that writes about their children is already I'm a fan of. Of 5 books he co-authored with former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura. 4 have reached the New York Times bestsellers list. They Killed Our President in 2013, and that was published in 2013. 63 documents the government doesn't want you to read. American's Conspiracy, and Don't Start the Revolution Without Me. A monumental biography, The Life and Ideas of James Hillman, Volume 1, The Making of a Psychologist, was published in 2013. Russell is currently working on a 2nd volume entitled Psychology Renegade. He also brought one of his mentees. We're going to be working with Mr. Russell. Judy and I have been made the official producers of the 2017 Green Festival. That means we are in charge of the main stage, presenters and entertainment and you name it. And they also has given us San Francisco. And so when we met Mr. Russell said, I've got a book coming out in environment. I was like, great. And so without further ado, he also brought one of his mentees, Mr. Romeo Keys. And so one thing I'm impressed about this man, come on up, man. One thing I'm impressed is that his work in Watts and in Compton and his foundation and the work that he's doing, I'm just totally enamored by, and I want to thank you. And so he's going to bring up Romeo in the midst of his talk. So give it up for Mr.
Thank you. Nice to see all of you. I'm going to sit over here or stand here so I can see you and you can see me. I just resonated with, it kind of blew my mind coming here today because the Sahara Desert movie, I actually hitchhiked across that Sahara Desert when I was about 22, and that well looked just like a well that had to draw water from when we were out of water. So that was pretty amazing to see. And Malidoma Somé, Leon talked about, is actually featured in the book that he showed you. He is indeed the shaman who is responsible for helping my son, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was 17, in a way that now my son is in his 30s, that nobody ever has. And that's a story I won't tell today, but Malidoma is very connected to the reason I'm here to talk to you about mentoring, which is a subject I never thought I would actually be standing and addressing a group of people about. But I'll tell you briefly how it happened. And it was 2 years ago. I'd been going through a pretty rough period in my life. My wife and I had split up after being together for 20 years. We're now back together, which is great. But it was a very hard time. A close friend of mine had actually died in the car as I was driving her back from a dentist appointment. Suffered a heart attack, and I didn't even know it had happened. I was really suffering at that point in my life. And I had a good friend named Orland Bishop, who some of you may know of. And I went to an event one day at a restorative justice event that he was having in LA. And afterwards, I was just standing in the hallway, and I was talking to a woman, and this guy came up named Hugo, and he started talking, and he said, you might be interested. He said, once a month we bring these kids together from the inner city, mostly black and Hispanic kids, and they come together in a thing called the Youth Mentoring Connection. We have an event called Echo, and they all come and they let their hair down about their lives and what they've been going through for the last month. And we're having one tomorrow night. I don't know, if you want to come, you can come. So I did. Changed my life. An amazing organization run by Tony LaRoe. Orland had helped start it 20 years earlier. And a young man came up to me before it started, introduced his girlfriend and said, "Hi, I'm Romeo." So we talked briefly, and the whole the mentoring, the Echo night started. There were about, I don't know, it was a full room, maybe 25, 30 young people. There were both boys, young girls and young guys, and they split up and went into separate rooms so the guys could just talk among themselves about what was happening and to them. And it was incredibly powerful and moving, and the fact that this feeling of community could happen among these young people, just bam, some of whom had never seen each other before. A lot of mentors were there too, and the whole thing began, and the ritual was very important, which it is. Reverend Leon talked about rites of passage, rites of initiation, and it's so lacking in our society today. I mean, you know, I think one big reason that there's so much going on with the gang world is because it's the only form of initiation that they really have.
That's it.
And so the kinds of things that Malidoma does and Reverend Leon and others are just so important to our young people. And so this particular night began with Tony usually start with a story or a poem, and he decided to use Homer's Odyssey as a way to talk to kids about their lives. And it was interesting because I didn't know this, but I do remember it. The word mentor comes from the Odyssey. Sirens, you know, we talk about today, that comes from the Odyssey. And he got to a point in the story, and he stopped, and he said, so can anybody in the room tell me what happens next? And this young fellow, 17 at the time, sitting across from me, named Romeo, started telling the whole rest of the Odyssey. I thought, wow, that's an interesting kid. And later he revealed during the course of the evening that when he was always in trouble, and when he was 13, I think, he was in juvenile detention, and they assigned him to read the whole dictionary and study the dictionary. And so he said he loved to read, and he always had, and he discovered that he not only loved to read, but he loved the myths. And he said, and I know all the myths. So the night went on, and we kind of connected in other ways, and I remember talking a little bit, because everybody does, about what they've been going through in their lives, so even the mentors talk. So I told a little bit about what I'd been going through that year, and suddenly I said, so I'm no stranger, and Romeo looked at me across the room and he says, you're no stranger to misfortune, which was an interesting phrase as well. So at the end of the night, I think I gave him a copy of My Mysterious Son, and I went home, and a friend of mine at home said, she was online the next morning, and I told the story and what it was like with this particular night, and she was looking up something about the Getty Villa in Malibu. Suddenly she says, you know, the Getty Villa has all these Greek and Roman sculpture rooms. I wonder if that young guy's ever seen that. Maybe he'd like to go. So I thought, maybe so. So I didn't know how to reach Romeo. I had no idea. And so I called the youth mentoring somebody there, and I said, well, if he shows up at the next meeting and he wants to give his phone number, then tell him I'd like to talk to him. So anyway, I ended up calling, and I remember when somebody answered, young person answered, and I said, is this Romeo? And he says, no, who's this? I said, well, this is Dick Russell. I met him at this. He says, oh, yeah, he told me about you. Here he is. So we put him on the phone, and I said, so Romeo, you ever been to the Getty? He says, what's that? I said, well, it's this place, they got these rooms, and Greek and Roman sculpture. I said, if you don't think it sounds weird, I said, if you don't think it's weird, I would take you sometime, and your girlfriend or your friend who was there, or whoever. He said, well, that sounds nice. So a couple of weeks, I don't know, a little more time went by, and I ended up, for the first time in my life, on a Sunday morning, driving into South Central LA, and pulling up in front of this little house there, and calling, and a woman's voice answered, and I said, is Romeo there? And she said, well, no, Romeo, he's not here. I said, oh, well, I'm supposed to take him somewhere in 10 minutes. She says, oh, yeah, he told me you might be coming. I said, well, what shall I do? Shall I just wait in the car? She says, oh, no, I think you better come in. So, I go in, and obviously not too many white people go to that neighborhood. So I hung out with Grandma for a little while, and she said, well, it's nice you're here. She said, he doesn't really have a father. She said his father's in jail, and his mother's lives in Vegas. She's on drugs. And so we talked for a little bit, and sure enough, after a little while, Romeo and a couple of his friends showed up, and so off we go in the car to Malibu, and it turned out that, to my surprise, so what did I know, right? I mean, he'd never been to a zoo, never seen the ocean. So there we go. We pull up to the Getty Villa, and it's this incredible, building and everything. We got in there, and Romeo didn't. he didn't want to see the gardens or anything, he just wanted to see these rooms where the sculptures were. So we walked in to the first room, he went to the first glass case, looked at whatever was in there, Roman or Greek, I don't remember, and turned and started telling me the whole story, who all the gods were, what the myth was, and he did this for 2.5 hours, at every single thing we saw. And he was so good at it that we had people following us around like he was the tour guide. So that was the beginning. I mean, it was an incredible day, actually. I mean, a memorable, unforgettable day. It gave me so much being with these kids. And I remember after 2.5 hours, we went to the bookstore. I told each one of them I'd get them a book. And so Romeo got The Greek Myths by Robert Graves, and his friend Dimash got Secret History of the World. And we got in the car, and Dimash in the back seat. He says, "Yeah, there was some really nice looking people in there." He says, "Hey, Dick, did you see some of those people looking at you like, where did you steal these children?" so we went to Duke's on the Malibu Pier, and so it turned out to be Mother's Day, and they had this wonderful buffet, and they had no tables available, and I stole us a table. I didn't care, and the lady says, "Well, can you be out of here in 45 minutes?" I said, "Sure." So anyway, they were going up and eating mussels and roast beef and all these things. At the end, we get to the end of the meal, and Romeo looks across the table at me and he says, "Hey Dick, you think we could do takeout?" So I said, "Well, I don't know." So I asked the waiter. He kind of looks at the table and he says, "I'm not supposed to do this." He brings 3 takeout boxes. He says, "Don't tell anybody what's in." So the boys go back and get all this great food, and it's Mother's Day, so they can bring it home to their grandmother. And anyway, it was just a marvelous day. And so that was the beginning. And I wrote the Getty Villa, and I told them this young fellow could be a tour guide out here. And so they wrote back and they said, "We do have these programs." And then I tried to get a hold of him, and I couldn't. And his grandmother said he'd left. He was in Vegas. She didn't know when he was coming back. And so I was sitting, I was in Boston a week or so later, visiting my son and hanging out after a day actually in prison at this restorative justice event that I went to. And my phone rings, and it's Romeo calling me from Vegas out of the blue, and telling me basically that he's not asking me for anything. He just says he'd like to come back to LA. And I remember afterwards my friend said, "Do you know what it took for that kid to call you, of all people? I mean, he's looking for something." And so anyway, I helped him get back on the bus, and we continued the relationship just off and on. I ended up taking him and his friends out on a whale watch, out to Oxnard. And it's a long, long story of this relationship, and I don't have time to tell the whole thing, but what happened that fall, I do want to talk about briefly, because I had gone away and I came back, and there had been an incident. I don't think Romeo and I am telling this because it all has a good ending. There had been an incident in a store in their neighborhood where he and his friend and another girl that they knew had walked in and gotten into a sort of a confrontation with the Asian store owner, and especially his friends. And what had happened was that the store owner who'd asked them to leave because the girl used the bathroom when she was told not to, and he brought out a can of mace and maced Romeo's friend in the face. And his friend just lost it and started beating the guy up. And it turned out the whole thing had been videoed on a store camera, and that the daughter then of the store owner went to the media, and this was on all 3 TV stations in LA, that these young people had beaten this guy up and had no reason to. Nothing was shown about the macing, of course. So anyway, again, a long story, sort of short, but Romeo ended up getting arrested. And in fact, he had not been the one who instigated this, and he tried to pull his friend off of the store owner. But it was a big deal in the media, and it was a lesson to me too about how the media works, and then how law enforcement works to pick up on a media story and target, go after, whoever they think should be. His friend had left the state, but they ended up finding Romeo, and so I heard about this from his girlfriend and tried like hell to get him some kind of legal assistance, and ended up. I was told that there was this one bondsman who would do bail bond for, like, I think it was, the bond itself was $50,000, but if they got 6% of that, they do it. So I bailed him out and picked him up in the middle of the night. And then there was a whole pretrial thing that happened after that, which I brought Orland Bishop into this and learned a great deal from him about mentoring. I brought Romeo out to see him, and I want to just share with you some of the things that were said, because both to Romeo and then to me, because it says a lot about what mentoring is. If there's time later, I'll get into this youth initiation weekend retreat that I went to, because I should also add that I took Romeo to Inside Out Writers, which is another incredible organization here in Los Angeles. It's for kids who have been in the juvenile detention system, and Mark Salzman wrote a great book about it.
There's a documentary too.
And there was a documentary
Yes.
about teaching writing inside juvenile hall. And so many young people find their voice through writing.